My name is Haley Mitchell, and I'm 22 years old. I'll never forget my graduation dinner at Barton's Steakhouse in Boston. After 4 years of hard work earning my psychology degree, I was beaming with pride as my family raised their glasses. Then my dad dropped a bomb during his toast. "Now you're old enough to pay rent or get out." The restaurant fell silent, champagne bubbles still rising in our glasses. My smile froze as confusion and hurt washed over me. Our family had never struggled financially, which made his ultimatum even more shocking. Before I tell you what happened the next day, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit subscribe if you want to see how I turned my dad's harsh ultimatum into the best decision of my life. I promise it's worth sticking around for. To understand why my dad's words hit me so hard that night, you need to know a bit about my family. I grew up in Wellesley, an affluent Boston suburb where most kids received cars on their 16th birthdays and summer trips to Europe were considered normal. Our 4-bedroom colonial house, with its manicured lawn and heated swimming pool, reflected my parents' success, but what we had in material comfort, we lacked in emotional connection. My father, James Mitchell, built his financial advisory firm from scratch after graduating from Wharton. He worked 60-hour weeks for as long as I can remember, his phone always within reach even during family dinners. Dad measured success in dollars and cents, constantly tracking investment returns and client acquisitions. He wasn't cruel or abusive, just perpetually absent, physically present but mentally calculating his next business move. Hard work and self-reliance build character was practically his personal motto. He'd tell me this whenever I faced challenges, from elementary school spelling bees to college applications. I learned early that tears or complaints wouldn't get his sympathy, only achievements earned his attention. Mom, Tina Mitchell, worked part-time selling luxury homes to Boston's elite. She kept our household running smoothly but rarely contradicted Dad. When tensions rose between my father and me, she'd gently suggest trying to understand his perspective or not taking things so personally. She loved me, but her conflict avoidance left me without an ally when I needed one. As an only child, I threw myself into academics to earn the approval my parents, especially Dad, seemed to ration so carefully. My report cards papered our refrigerator, but only the A-plus grades received comment. B's were met with questions about what went wrong and how I planned to correct course. I became a master of anticipating expectations, carefully crafting my achievements to maximize parental approval. When college application time came, Dad naturally assumed I'd pursue business or economics. He'd already mapped my future, an MBA followed by a position at his firm. My announcement about majoring in psychology triggered our first major confrontation. Psychology, he'd scoffed. What kind of career path is that? Those who can't do, analyze others doing. I stood my ground, surprising both of us. Something about his dismissal of my passion ignited a rarely accessed courage. After a tense week of minimal conversation, he reluctantly agreed to fund my education at Boston University. "Your choice," he said, "but don't expect me to bail you out when you can't find a job that pays the bills." Throughout college, I lived in the dorms, but came home during breaks and summers. These visits followed a predictable pattern. Initial pleasantries would gradually give way to probing questions about my future employment prospects and suggestions about more practical career paths. I'd carefully planned to stay home during my graduate studies, calculating that the money saved on rent would offset student loans. We'd never explicitly discussed this arrangement, but my room remained untouched, suggesting tacit approval. The morning of graduation dawned sunny and perfect. Mom helped me style my hair while Dad polished his dress shoes in the kitchen. They seemed genuinely proud as they took photos of me in my cap and gown, the blue and scarlet cords representing my honor status draped around my neck. Dad even made a rare joke about how the professional photographer they'd hired better capture that expensive piece of paper. For those few hours, I felt we were the family I'd always wanted us to be. I remember catching Dad looking at me with what seemed like genuine pride during the ceremony. When the dean called my name, I heard my father's voice rise above the applause. "That's my daughter." Walking across the stage, degree in hand, I thought perhaps I'd finally earned his unconditional approval. The dinner reservation was for 7 o'clock, allowing time for post-graduation photos and the drive downtown. As we headed to the restaurant, I had no hint that my carefully constructed future was about to crumble with a single toast. Barton's Steakhouse represented Boston old money, dark wood paneling, leather banquettes, and waiters who moved with the quiet efficiency of those who serve the wealthy. Dad had reserved the private dining room, which featured a long mahogany table beneath a crystal chandelier and windows overlooking the Charles River. The restaurant's signature scent of aged beef and expensive scotch created an atmosphere of celebration and success. Our extended family had gathered to celebrate: my grandparents Mitchell, Dad's parents, Grandma Lynn, Mom's mother, Uncle Philip, and Aunt Meredith, with my cousins Jackson and Taylor. Everyone dressed impressively, as family gatherings always required. Grandpa Mitchell, himself a retired investment banker, patted my shoulder with approval when I explained my plans for a master's in clinical psychology. "Always good to have expertise in understanding people," he said, winking. "Your father could have used some of that in his younger days." The waiter circulated with champagne while we waited for the first course. Dad, unusually relaxed, ordered a bottle of Chateau Margaux 2005, a wine I knew cost several $100s. "Nothing but the best for my graduate," he announced, an uncharacteristic display of generosity that should have been my first warning sign. Dad only made grand gestures when he had news to deliver. The appetizers arrived: bacon-wrapped scallops, beef carpaccio, and artisanal cheese boards. Conversation flowed easily as Uncle Philip recounted his latest sailing adventure and Aunt Meredith updated everyone on Cousin Taylor's soccer scholarship. When Mom mentioned my graduate school plans starting that fall, I noticed Dad's jaw tighten slightly, but he quickly masked it by signaling the waiter for more wine. As the main courses arrived: prime rib for Dad, Chilean sea bass for Mom, and filet mignon for me, my father stood, tapping his knife against his crystal glass. The table quieted as everyone turned expectantly toward him. My heart swelled, anticipating words of pride and encouragement. "Today," he began, his voice carrying the authoritative tone he used with clients, "we celebrate Haley's achievement. For years of hard work have resulted in an impressive degree." He raised his glass toward me. "Your mother and I are proud of your academic success." The compliment, so direct and unqualified, was rare enough that I felt my eyes mist over. But then his expression shifted subtly. "As we close this chapter," he continued, "it's time to discuss the next phase of adult life." He took a measured sip of his wine, eyes meeting mine over the rim of his glass. "You've got your degree now. You're officially an adult. Starting next month, you're old enough to pay rent or get out. Time to learn how the real world works." The words landed like a physical blow. The restaurant sounds receded as blood rushed to my ears. I glanced around the table, hoping someone would laugh or indicate this was a poorly conceived joke. Instead, I saw Grandma Lynn's widened eyes, Aunt Meredith's uncomfortable expression, and Mom's gaze fixed firmly on her plate. $800 monthly seems fair market value, Dad continued as if discussing any business transaction. "Starting July 1st. Or you can find your own place, of course." An excruciating silence followed. My throat constricted as I fought back tears, determined not to create a scene. Uncle Philip cleared his throat awkwardly. Cousin Jackson suddenly found his napkin fascinating. Finally, Aunt Meredith attempted to salvage the moment. "Well, this sea bass is absolutely divine. Haley, have you tried it? Here, take a bite from my plate." The conversation gradually resumed, stilted and artificial. I pushed food around my plate, no longer hungry. When the waiter asked if I wanted my barely touched fillet wrapped to take home, I nodded numbly, incapable of forming words without releasing the sob building in my chest. Dessert arrived, a custom cake decorated with "Congratulations Graduate" in blue icing. I forced a smile for photos, mechanically opened graduation cards containing checks and gift cards, and thanked everyone with rehearsed pleasantries. Inside, I was calculating rent costs against my meager savings from campus work-study jobs, panic rising with each mental tabulation. The drive home passed in silence. Dad turned on NPR, focusing on the financial report as if nothing unusual had occurred. Mom reached back once to squeeze my hand, her eyes apologetic but her mouth firmly closed. I stared out the window, watching Boston's lights blur through unshed tears. In my childhood bedroom, surrounded by academic trophies and psychology textbooks, I finally let myself cry. The stuffed bear I'd had since childhood, Mr. Buttons, witnessed my breakdown as I cycled through hurt, betrayal, and fear. How could my father ambush me like that? What would happen to my graduate school plans? Where would I live with almost no savings? I scrolled through apartment listings on my phone, each astronomical rent figure increasing my anxiety. Boston ranked among America's most expensive cities for housing. Entry-level jobs in psychology typically paid barely above minimum wage. The math simply didn't work. Around 3 a.m., exhaustion finally overtook my racing thoughts. As I drifted toward uneasy sleep, something shifted inside me. The hurt began crystallizing into determination. If my father wanted to teach me about the real world, perhaps it was time I learned, on my own terms. I woke up the next morning with swollen eyes, but surprising clarity. The digital clock read 7:15 a.m., about the time Dad would be having his breakfast before heading to the office. Perfect. After splashing cold water on my face and pulling my hair into a presentable ponytail, I headed downstairs. As expected, my father sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through stock updates on his tablet while sipping black coffee. Mom stood by the stove, preparing his usual egg white omelet with spinach. "Good morning," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Dad glanced up briefly. "Morning." Mom turned with forced brightness. "Haley, would you like an omelet too? Or maybe French toast to celebrate your big day yesterday?" I ignored her attempt at normalcy. Actually, I wanted to clarify something about dinner last night. I poured myself coffee, standing directly across from my father. "Did you mean what you said about rent?" Dad set down his tablet, giving me his full attention, something rare enough that it normally would have made me nervous. Today, it just fueled my resolve. "Of course I meant it," he replied evenly. $800 monthly, starting July 1st. That's 10 days from now. Or you find your own place. You're 22 with a college degree. Time to contribute or move on. "James," Mom interjected softly, "maybe we could work something out. Haley's planning for graduate school and graduate students pay rent too," he cut her off. "The sooner she understands financial responsibility, the better prepared she'll be for real life." I took a deep breath, processing his confirmation. The hurt from last night transformed into something harder, more determined. "I see. Thank you for clarifying." Without another word, I returned to my room and closed the door. Sitting cross-legged on my bed, I opened my laptop and created a spreadsheet. My savings totaled $3,427.82, enough for maybe 2 months' rent and security deposit in a questionable neighborhood, without accounting for utilities, food, or transportation. My part-time campus job had ended with graduation, and I hadn't secured summer employment, having planned to focus on preparing for graduate studies. My phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine, my best friend since freshman year. "How are you feeling today?" That dinner sounded brutal. I called her immediately, the words tumbling out as I recounted the morning's confirmation of my father's ultimatum. "What an absolute jerk move," Jasmine fumed. "No warning, no discussion, just pay up or get out." "Who does that?" "Apparently, my father does," I replied, staring at my insufficient savings balance. "So, what are you going to do?" "I don't know. The numbers don't add up. Even the cheapest studios in Boston start around $1,200, and that's before utilities. I'd need a full-time job, which would mean deferring grad school, but entry-level positions in psychology." My voice trailed off. "Wait," Jasmine interrupted. "My Aunt Bailey owns some property in Dorchester. She mentioned needing help with one of her buildings. Let me call her." While waiting for Jasmine to call back, I researched deferral policies for my graduate program. Boston University would allow deferment for 1 year without losing my acceptance or scholarship package, a small relief amidst the chaos. 30 minutes later, Jasmine called back, excitement evident in her voice. Bailey wants to meet you this afternoon. She needs an on-site manager for one of her apartment buildings. The previous person just quit, and she's desperate. It might include reduced rent. Hope flickered for the first time since my father's announcement. I quickly pulled together a resume highlighting my organizational skills from various campus leadership positions, added letters of recommendation from professors, and gathered financial documents to demonstrate responsibility. Then, I packed a small overnight bag, a symbolic gesture that felt necessary. As I prepared to leave, I glanced around my childhood bedroom. The psychology textbooks, academic awards, and photos with friends at campus events told the story of who I'd become, someone different from the compliant daughter my parents expected. I realized I was ready for this push from the nest, even if the timing and delivery were cruel. I left the house without informing my parents of my destination. The warm June air carried the scent of freshly cut grass as I waited at the bus stop, my overnight bag and portfolio clutched tightly. The bus took me across town to Dorchester, a neighborhood I rarely visited despite growing up nearby. As the scenery changed from manicured estates to more diverse working-class areas, I reflected on my sheltered upbringing and limited experience with the real world my father was so eager for me to enter. Bailey's office occupied the first floor of a converted Victorian home. The worn but clean waiting area featured mismatched furniture and a bulletin board covered with community announcements. A bell jingled as I entered, and moments later, a woman in her 50s with cropped silver hair and bright red glasses appeared. "You must be Haley," she said, extending a hand. "Jasmine's told me a lot about you." "I'm Bailey Rhodes." Her handshake was firm, her gaze direct but kind. Something about her no-nonsense demeanor reminded me of a more approachable version of my father, competent and straightforward, but without the emotional coldness. As I followed her into her cluttered office, I sensed my future was about to change dramatically. "So," Bailey said, settling behind a desk overflowing with files and property maintenance catalogs, "Jasmine tells me you need housing and I need a building manager. Potential win-win if you're up for a challenge." She didn't waste time on small talk, which I appreciated given my emotional state. I handed her my hastily prepared portfolio. "I've put together some information about my experience and references." Bailey glanced at it briefly before setting it aside. "Impressive academic credentials, but that's not what concerns me. Managing a building isn't like acing an exam. It's unpredictable, sometimes messy, and requires both backbone and diplomacy." She leaned forward, studying me with shrewd eyes. "Let me be direct. I own several properties across Boston. One of my buildings on Savon Hill needs an on-site manager. 10 units, mostly working-class tenants. The previous manager quit without notice last week after a dispute with a difficult tenant. What would the job entail?" I asked, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. "Collecting monthly rent, handling minor maintenance issues, coordinating with repair services when needed, enforcing building rules, and being the first point of contact for tenant concerns," Bailey explained. "In exchange, you'd get the studio apartment on the first floor at significantly reduced rent, $400 monthly instead of the normal $950. My heart leapt at the number, less than my father's demand and within my limited budget. Still, uncertainty nagged at me. "I've never done anything like this before." Bailey's laugh was warm but without mockery. "Nobody is born knowing how to manage property, Haley. But based on what Jasmine tells me, you're organized, responsible, and not afraid of hard work. Those are the qualities I need." She stood, grabbing a ring of keys from her desk drawer. "Let's go see the place. Then you can decide if you're interested." 20 minutes later, we pulled up in front of a 3-story brick building. Though clearly aged, it appeared structurally sound, with clean windows and a recently swept entrance. The neighborhood was a far cry from Wellesley's manicured perfection, more diverse, livelier, with corner stores and small businesses lining the main street. "The building dates to the 1920s, Bailey explained as she unlocked the front door. "I've maintained it well, but it's not luxury living. The entryway featured terrazzo flooring with a few cracks and walls that needed fresh paint. A row of mailboxes, most showing signs of long use, lined one wall. Bailey pointed to a door just off the lobby. That would be your apartment. Being on the ground floor means tenants can easily find you if there's an issue. Before showing me the apartment, Bailey introduced me to some of the tenants we encountered. Mrs. Garcia, an elderly woman from Unit 3B, immediately complained about a leaking faucet in rapid Spanish-English hybrid sentences. Mr. and Mrs. Lee from 2A nodded politely as they carried groceries upstairs. A harried-looking woman named Diane from 3C briefly greeted us while hurrying her two small children along. "And that's Ryan in 2C, Bailey murmured as a man in his 30s with an elaborate neck tattoo passed us with barely a nod. "He's your challenging tenant. Always has excuses about late rent, plays music too loud, but knows exactly how far he can push before I can legally evict him." By the time we reached my potential apartment, I felt overwhelmed by the prospect of managing these diverse personalities and problems. The studio itself was small but clean, with a kitchenette along one wall, a bathroom with a shower stall, and enough space for a bed and small sitting area. The previous manager had left behind a desk and chair that Bailey said I could use or dispose of as I wished. "It's not fancy," Bailey acknowledged, "but it's functional and, most importantly, affordable." Standing in that empty studio, I felt equally terrified and exhilarated. This was real independence, not the comfortable, privileged version I'd experienced at college with my parents footing the bills. Back in Bailey's car, she surprised me with her candor. "Look, Haley, Jasmine told me about your situation. Your father's ultimatum was harsh, but I've seen this before. Well-off parents who think they're teaching valuable life lessons by pushing kids out without proper preparation." She adjusted her red glasses before continuing. "I can tell you've had a privileged upbringing. No judgment, that's not your fault. But it means you have gaps in practical experience that might make this job challenging." My cheeks flushed with embarrassment at being so transparent. "I know I have a lot to learn." "That's the right attitude," Bailey nodded approvingly. "Here's my offer, 3-month trial period. You manage the building, learn the ropes. I'll be available for questions and emergencies. After 3 months, we both decide if it's working out. If yes, we extend for a year. If not, no hard feelings, and I help you find alternative arrangements." She extended her hand. "What do you say?" I hesitated only briefly before shaking it. "I accept." "Excellent. One more thing," Bailey added, her expression serious. "This job isn't just about proving something to your father. It's about proving something to yourself. Don't take it unless you're committed to doing it well." Her words resonated with unexpected force. For years, I'd shaped my actions around my father's approval or disapproval. This decision needed to be about my own growth. "I'm committed," I said with newfound determination. After signing preliminary paperwork at Bailey's office, I called the university to request a deferral for my graduate program. The administrative assistant connected me with Dr. Wilson, my intended advisor. A year of practical experience managing property and dealing with diverse populations? Dr. Wilson responded when I explained my situation. "That's valuable real-world experience that will inform your clinical practice. I fully support your deferment and look forward to your return with these additional insights." His enthusiastic endorsement further validated my decision. By late afternoon, I returned home, ready to inform my parents of my plans. The next chapter of my life was about to begin, in a direction none of us had anticipated just 24 hours earlier. I found both my parents in the living room when I returned home, an unusual occurrence for a weekday afternoon. Mom sat perched nervously on the edge of the sofa, while Dad stood by the fireplace, arms crossed. Their positions suggested they'd been discussing me, and Mom's red-rimmed eyes hinted at the conversation's emotional nature. "Where have you been all day?" Dad demanded immediately. "Your mother's been worried." I set my portfolio on the coffee table and remained standing. "I've been securing housing and employment, as per your instructions at dinner last night." My calm delivery clearly surprised him. He'd expected tears, pleading, or capitulation, not decisive action. He recovered quickly. What kind of employment? Where? I've accepted a position as a resident property manager in Dorchester, I explained. The compensation includes reduced rent for a studio apartment. Mom gasped softly. Dorchester? But that's not a safe area for a young woman alone. Parts of Dorchester are perfectly safe, Mom. The building is well maintained and near the T-station. I kept my voice steady, though my hands trembled slightly. I've already signed an agreement and will be moving in this weekend. Dad's expression shifted from surprise to skepticism. Property manager? What do you know about managing property? This sounds like a hasty decision to prove a point. I know very little about property management, I admitted. But I'm a quick learner and the owner is willing to train me. As for proving a point, isn't that exactly what you intended with your ultimatum? To push me into the real world. He frowned. I expected you to find a proper job using your degree, not take the first opportunity that came along just to spite me. This isn't about spite, I countered, frustration building. It's about independence, something you've supposedly valued all these years. And I'm deferring graduate school for a year to gain practical experience, which my advisor thinks is an excellent idea. Deferring school? Mom interjected. But you were so excited about the program. I still am, and I'll start next fall. But right now, I need to establish financial independence, as Dad made clear last night. Dad paced toward the window and back. You won't last a week in the real world. Managing property means dealing with difficult people, handling emergencies, making tough decisions. It's not something you can learn from textbooks. His dismissal ignited something fierce within me. You've never believed I could stand on my own feet, have you? Despite all the academic achievements and responsible choices I've made, you still see me as incapable. That's not true, he protested, but his tone lacked conviction. It is true, I pressed. You've always measured my worth by how well I followed your prescribed path. When I chose psychology instead of business, you practically wrote me off as a failure before I'd even begun. Mom stood, moving between us. Haley, your father just wants what's best for you. We both do. No, Mom. Dad wants what's easiest for him to understand, which is someone following exactly in his footsteps. The words flowed now, years of unspoken frustrations finding voice. And you've always stood by and let him dictate terms, even when you disagreed. Her face crumpled. That's not fair. I've always supported you. Support isn't just silent sympathy, Mom. Sometimes it's speaking up when something is wrong. I softened my tone, seeing her genuine hurt. Like last night, when Dad blindsided me at my graduation dinner. Did you agree with that approach? Her silence was answer enough. Dad's face had reddened during our exchange. Your psychology degree really was useless if you think the world operates on feelings and fairness. I built everything we have through hard work and practical decisions, not emotional reactions. My degree taught me that dismissing emotions doesn't eliminate them, it just drives them underground where they cause more damage, I replied. And psychology is practical. It's about understanding people and helping them navigate life's challenges, something that seems to be lacking in this family. We stared at each other. Decades of mismatched expectations crystallized in that moment. Finally, I broke the silence. I'm going upstairs to pack. Jasmine is coming tomorrow to help me move my things. As I turned to leave, Dad called after me. If you're determined to do this, don't expect financial help when it falls apart. No bailouts, no emergency funds. I paused at the stairs. I'll be fine on my own. Thanks for teaching me that lesson. Upstairs, I sorted through my belongings with new perspective. The designer clothes Mom had insisted on now seemed impractical for my new life. The collection of psychology books and research materials felt essential. My childhood memorabilia required painful triage: what to keep, what to store, what to leave behind. I packed efficiently, the skill honed through multiple college moves. Each item represented a choice about my new identity. The framed family photo from my high school graduation? Left on the nightstand. My well-worn copy of Frankel's Man's Search for Meaning? Carefully packed. Dad's gift of pearl earrings from my 18th birthday? After hesitation, packed. Complicated emotions didn't negate their beauty or significance. Jasmine arrived the next morning with coffee and determined efficiency. My parents remained scarce. Mom briefly appearing to awkwardly offer help before retreating when I gently declined, Dad conspicuously absent, having left for his office earlier than usual. We loaded Jasmine's Honda with my essentials: clothes, books, laptop, bedding, and personal items. The car filled quickly, forcing further painful decisions about what could wait for a second trip or might need to be abandoned entirely. As we prepared to leave, I stood in my bedroom doorway for a final survey. The space looked strangely unaltered despite the missing elements that made it mine. The pale blue walls my mother had let me choose in 10th grade. The window seat where I'd spent countless hours reading psychology journals. The bulletin board now half empty of its photos and mementos. Mom appeared beside me, her expression a complex mixture of worry and something like admiration. "You've always been stronger than we gave you credit for," she said softly. "I learned to be," I replied, not unkindly. She pressed an envelope into my hand. "Emergency fund," she whispered. "Don't tell your father." I considered refusing but recognized the gesture as her attempt at asserting independence too. "Thank you." Our goodbye was brief and awkward. No dramatic speeches or tearful embraces, just a quick hug and promises to call soon. As Jasmine's car pulled away, I resisted looking back at the house. My focus needed to be forward now. The drive to Dorchester passed mostly in silence, both of us processing the magnitude of this change. When we arrived at the brick building that would become my home, reality crashed over me. This wasn't the temporary move to college dorms with the security of home waiting. This was stepping completely into adulthood, with all its freedoms and terrifying responsibilities. "You've got this," Jasmine said, reading my expression as we carried the first boxes inside. The empty studio looked smaller than I remembered. My possessions, which had seemed so carefully curated during packing, now appeared random and insufficient for creating a proper home. The afternoon disappeared in a flurry of unpacking and organizing, with Jasmine helping arrange furniture and hanging curtains she'd brought as a housewarming gift. When she finally left around 8 p.m., promising to return with the second load tomorrow, the silence of the apartment enveloped me. I sat on my newly made bed, surveying my new domain. The kitchenette I had no idea how to properly stock. The bathroom with its temperamental water pressure. The single window overlooking a small courtyard rather than our Wellesley garden. For the first time since my father's announcement, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of fear and uncertainty. But alongside those emotions ran an unfamiliar current of pride. I had taken action rather than capitulation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, in this tiny apartment that was completely mine, I had taken the first step toward genuine independence. My first week as property manager delivered a crash course in adult responsibility that no university could provide. Day one began with Bailey introducing me to building systems, the ancient boiler in the basement that required periodic bleeding, the electrical panel with its cryptic labeling, and the garbage collection schedule that seemed designed to confuse newcomers. "Always check the hallways each morning," Bailey advised. "You'd be surprised what appears overnight." She wasn't wrong. By day 3, I'd already removed abandoned furniture, cleaned up spilled trash, and posted notices about proper disposal procedures. Each task required confronting my lifelong aversion to conflict, a trait developed through years of navigating my father's unyielding personality. Learning to navigate tenant interactions proved even more challenging. Mrs. Garcia from 3B knocked on my door at 6:30 a.m. to demonstrate her leaking faucet through elaborate pantomime and rapid Spanglish. I nodded comprehensively while making mental notes to download a translation app immediately. The Lee family from 2A brought homemade dumplings as a welcome gift, but seemed disappointed when I couldn't understand their Mandarin explanation of the ingredients. Diane from 3C asked if I could watch her children, just for an hour, while she attended a job interview, requiring a diplomatic explanation about manager boundaries. My first maintenance challenge arrived when Mr. Peterson's toilet in 1B overflowed, flooding not only his bathroom but seeping into the hallway carpet. Panic threatened to overwhelm me as I frantically searched for the water shutoff valve while simultaneously calling Bailey and apologizing to affected neighbors. "Turn the valve behind the toilet clockwise," Bailey instructed calmly over the phone. Then get the wet vacuum from the maintenance closet. 2 hours later, soaked to my knees and smelling of disinfectant, I had gained practical knowledge no textbook could provide. Mr. Peterson, initially irritated, softened when he saw my determined if amateurish efforts, eventually offering to show me the proper way to plunge a toilet, something every adult should know. The coffee shop 2 blocks away provided my other lifeline to solvency. Though I'd never worked food service before, the daily grind hired me for weekend shifts based on my people skills, a hiring decision I suspected had more to do with the manager's desperation than my qualifications. Learning to operate the espresso machine, memorize complex drink orders, and maintain a cheerful demeanor through the morning rush constituted another steep learning curve. My first paycheck, though modest, brought disproportionate satisfaction. This was money I'd earned entirely through my own efforts, without family connections or privilege smoothing the way. I celebrated by purchasing a second-hand coffee table from Goodwill and a small potted plant, modest improvements that made my studio feel incrementally more like home. The first rent collection day loomed as my biggest challenge. Bailey provided a ledger and receipt book, along with practical advice. Be professional but firm. Don't accept partial payments without written agreements for the balance. And never, ever discuss one tenant's situation with another. Most tenants paid without issue, some even seeming to appreciate my nervous professionalism. Mrs. Garcia handed over crisp bills carefully counted out from an envelope. The Lee family paid by check with meticulous handwriting. Diane requested an extra day, explaining apologetically about a delayed paycheck. Then came Ryan from 2C, the problematic tenant Bailey had warned me about. He answered his door shirtless, revealing the continuation of his neck tattoo across his chest, an elaborate dragon design that might have been impressive if not accompanied by his dismissive sneer. New manager, huh? You're just a kid. Where's Bailey? I straightened my posture, channeling my father's boardroom confidence. Ms. Rhodes has appointed me as the new property manager. I'm here to collect June's rent. Ryan leaned against his doorframe. Yeah, about that. I'm gonna need another week. Had some unexpected expenses. I understand circumstances arise, I replied, recalling Bailey's coaching, but rent was due today. Is there a portion you can pay now? His expression hardened. Look, princess, this isn't your daddy's mansion. Things work differently in the real world. I'll pay when I get paid, all right? The princess comment stung with its proximity to truth. My mind flashed to my father's prediction of failure. But something else flared alongside the hurt, determination. My name is Haley Mitchell, not princess, I stated firmly. And in the real world, rental agreements specify payment dates for a reason. If you're experiencing financial difficulties, we can discuss a payment plan, but I'll need something in writing and an initial payment today. Our staring contest lasted perhaps 15 seconds before he muttered a curse and disappeared inside. He returned with a crumpled $100 bill. This is all you're getting today. Take it or leave it. I took it, wrote a receipt specifying the remaining balance, and had him sign an agreement to pay the rest within 10 days. Whether he would honor it remained uncertain, but I'd stood my ground, a small victory that felt monumental. When I reported the interaction to Bailey during our weekly meeting, she seemed impressed. Most new managers either get intimidated or overreact. You found the middle path. Well done. Her approval meant more than I expected, perhaps because it was earned rather than an obligation of kinship. Our weekly meetings gradually evolved from strict business to include personal conversation and occasional meals. Bailey, I discovered, had built her property business from nothing after leaving an abusive marriage in her 30s. Her direct manner masked genuine compassion and a wealth of practical wisdom. Property management teaches you everything about human nature, she told me over coffee one morning. You see people at their most vulnerable, dealing with basic needs like shelter, and at their most difficult, when those needs are threatened. This perspective helped me connect my current work with my psychology studies. I began keeping a journal of observations and interactions, noting patterns of behavior and effective communication strategies, material that would prove valuable when I eventually returned to academic study. My apartment slowly transformed from sparse necessity to comfortable home. Thrift store finds, carefully selected for both function and character, replaced the temporary solutions of those first weeks. A colorful rug covered the worn linoleum floor. Framed prints brightened beige walls. String lights added warmth to the institutional ceiling fixture. The building's tenants gradually accepted me as a legitimate authority rather than an inexperienced imposter. Mrs. Garcia began bringing occasional homemade empanadas, insisting I was too skinny. Mr. Lee offered to teach me basic plumbing repairs after witnessing my struggle with a clogged drain. Even Ryan nodded respectfully when we passed in the hallway, though he continued to be chronically late with rent. 6 weeks into my tenure, the building faced its first major crisis. A severe thunderstorm caused water to leak through the roof, affecting multiple apartments on the top floor. Panicked calls from tenants began around 2 a.m., pulling me from sleep into emergency response mode. I coordinated bucket brigades, helped move furniture away from damaged areas, and contacted emergency repair services despite the late hour. By dawn, I'd arranged temporary accommodations for 2 displaced families, documented damage for insurance claims, and scheduled contractors for estimates, all while maintaining a calm exterior that belied my internal stress. Bailey arrived around 8 a.m., surveying the situation with approval. "You handled this better than managers I've had with years of experience," she remarked. "How did you know to call Reliable Roofing instead of waiting for regular business hours?" Their website said 24-hour emergency service, and their reviews mentioned fair pricing even for after-hours calls, I explained. "It seemed worth the extra expense to prevent further damage." She nodded appreciatively. "That's exactly right. Good property management is about calculated decisions, not just cutting costs at every turn." The crisis marked a turning point in my relationship with the building community. Tenants who had viewed me with skepticism now expressed gratitude for my quick response. Mrs. Garcia brought homemade chicken soup to the displaced families. The Lees helped clean water-damaged hallways without being asked. Even Diane offered to assist with paperwork, revealing her previous experience as an insurance office assistant. As July turned to August, I realized no contact had come from my parents. Despite my determination to succeed independently, their silence stung. One evening, while sorting maintenance requests, I drafted and deleted multiple text messages to my mother, pride battling loneliness in a familiar internal struggle. The knock on my door came unexpectedly on a Sunday afternoon. I opened it to find my mother standing awkwardly in the hallway, holding a shopping bag and a small houseplant. "Your father had a business golf meeting," she explained hurriedly. "I thought I'd bring some things you left behind." I invited her in, watching her eyes catalog my modest apartment. To her credit, she made no disparaging comments about the size or neighborhood, instead noticing my decorative touches with apparent approval. "You've made it very homey," she offered, setting down the plant. "Spider plants are nearly impossible to kill. Not that you would, but just in case." Her nervous chatter revealed the discomfort of crossing the boundary I'd established. We sat at my small dining table, making stilted conversation about neutral topics, her garden club, my cousin's soccer tournament, an upcoming exhibition at the Museum of Fine Arts. Finally, she addressed the elephant in the room. "Your father misses you, though he'd never admit it." I raised an eyebrow skeptically. "He does," she insisted. "He asks if I've heard from you. Checks your social media when he thinks I don't notice." "He could call or text," I pointed out. "Communication works both ways." Mom sighed. "You know how he is. Pride runs deep in the Mitchell bloodline." She hesitated before adding, "He didn't expect you to actually leave. Or succeed if you did." "Then he doesn't know me very well," I replied, surprised by the lack of bitterness in my voice. The observation felt more like an objective truth than an accusation. "Perhaps not," she conceded. "Though in fairness, you've surprised me too." I worried constantly that first week, imagining all sorts of disasters. Our conversation gradually relaxed, becoming more genuine than many we'd had while living under the same roof. As she prepared to leave, Mom embraced me tightly. "I'm proud of you, Haley. Whatever happens with this place, you've proven you can stand on your own." After she left, I noticed a text message from my father. "How are you doing?" "Just that. No apology, no elaboration. Typical dad communication, terse and unembellished. After consideration, I responded with equal brevity, doing well. Learning a lot. His reply came surprisingly quickly, good. One word, but something in it felt like a beginning. Not forgiveness exactly, nor reconciliation, but acknowledgement. For now, it was enough. 6 months after my father's ultimatum at graduation dinner, my studio apartment had transformed from an emergency solution into a genuine home. Photographs filled the wall above my desk, not just college memories, but new ones. Bailey and me celebrating after successfully negotiating a new garbage collection contract. The building's summer cookout where Mrs. Garcia taught me to make authentic paella. My coffee shop coworkers and I after winning a local barista competition. The building had improved under my management as well. Fresh paint brightened the hallways, a weekend project where several tenants volunteered to help. The small courtyard now featured container gardens tended by Mr. Lee, who discovered my complete lack of horticultural knowledge. Plants need water and sunlight. Both, and taken it upon himself to educate me. Even Ryan had become, if not friendly, at least respectful after I helped him navigate a complicated situation with his parole officer. He now paid rent on time and occasionally assisted with heavy maintenance tasks without being asked. My management skills had developed from desperate improvisation to confident competence. I could now troubleshoot common plumbing issues, negotiate with service providers, mediate tenant disputes, and manage the building's modest budget without Bailey's supervision. The twice-weekly panic attacks of those early months had faded to occasional moments of doubt. I developed an informal dispute resolution system that drew on my psychology background, regular community meetings where tenants could address concerns before they escalated, clear communication about building policies, and consistent follow-through on promises made. Bailey was impressed enough to increase my responsibilities, occasionally asking me to check on issues at her other properties. I'm considering purchasing another building in Jamaica Plain, she told me during our monthly planning meeting. Would you be interested in expanding your management role? It would mean more hours, but also more compensation. The offer validated my growth over these months. I'd like to discuss it, I replied. I'm planning to restart my graduate program in the fall, but I might be able to manage both with proper scheduling. Exactly what I wanted to hear, Bailey nodded approvingly. Balancing education and practical experience will make you more effective in both areas. Think about it and let me know. Our conversation was interrupted by a text message from my mother, your father, and I would like to take you to dinner Saturday. Your choice of restaurant. The invitation sparked mixed emotions. We'd maintained limited contact over the past months, occasional text messages, brief phone calls on holidays, one awkward lunch with my mother when she was in the neighborhood. My father and I had established a fragile truce of careful communication, neither of us mentioning that fateful graduation dinner. After consideration, I replied, Barton Steakhouse, 7 p.m.? The choice was deliberate, returning to the scene of the ultimatum that had changed everything. My mother's response came quickly, perfect. Your father says he's looking forward to it. That Saturday evening, I selected my outfit with unusual care, professional but not formal, confident but not showy. The woman who entered Barton Steakhouse looked very different from the shocked graduate who'd left in tears 6 months earlier. External changes, a new haircut, clothes chosen for practicality rather than parental approval, reflected deeper internal transformation. My parents waited in the same private dining room, the setting triggering a momentary flutter of anxiety that I quickly managed with breathing techniques learned during particularly stressful building emergencies. Dad stood as I approached, his expression a complex mixture of assessment and something softer. You look well, he offered as we exchanged awkward greetings. Managing property agrees with me, I replied, accepting the glass of wine the waiter poured. Conversation during appetizers remained superficial, comments about the restaurant's renovation, updates on relatives, observations about the unseasonably warm weather. As our main courses arrived, my father finally addressed the elephant in the room. Your mother tells me you've become quite the building manager. I've learned a lot, I acknowledged. Practical experience has been invaluable. He nodded, cutting his prime rib with precise movements. Bailey Rhodes has a solid reputation in Boston real estate circles. Unorthodox methods, but consistent results. The fact that he'd researched Bailey suggested more interest in my new life than he'd previously indicated. My mother watched our exchange with barely concealed anxiety, ready to intervene if tensions escalated. I may have been. My father began, then paused, recalibrating. My approach at your graduation dinner was unnecessarily abrupt. Coming from him, this constituted a significant apology. Rather than immediately accepting or dismissing it, I considered my response carefully. It was abrupt, I agreed, and hurtful in both timing and delivery. But the outcome has been surprisingly positive. His eyebrows rose slightly. How so? I've discovered capabilities I didn't know I possessed. Independence suits me. I took a sip of wine before adding, though I would have appreciated a more collaborative discussion about the transition to adulthood. My mother's intervention came gently. We're both so proud of how you've handled everything, Haley. Taking initiative, solving problems, building a life on your own terms. Are you? I asked, looking directly at my father. He set down his knife and fork, giving me his full attention. Yes, he said simply. You've shown remarkable resourcefulness. Different from the path I would have chosen, but effective nonetheless. From him, this constituted high praise. 6 months ago, I would have grasped at this approval desperately. Now, I recognized it as valuable but not essential to my self-worth. I'm restarting my graduate program in the fall, I informed them. Bailey has offered me an expanded management role that I can balance with studies. Will you need financial assistance? Dad asked, his default mode of support. No, I replied confidently. Between my management compensation, coffee shop income, and scholarships, I've worked out a sustainable budget. I may need to take some student loans for the final semesters, but I've calculated manageable repayment terms. The flash of surprise in his eyes was quickly replaced by respect. You've developed solid financial planning skills. I had a good example of fiscal responsibility growing up, I acknowledged, offering the olive branch. Just needed practical application opportunities. Our dinner concluded without dramatic reconciliation, but with something potentially more valuable, a reset of our relationship based on mutual respect rather than dependency. My father wasn't suddenly transformed into an emotionally expressive parent, nor had I become the business-focused daughter he'd once envisioned. Instead, we'd found a middle ground where our differences could coexist without constant friction. As weeks passed, I continued building my dual path, property management and psychology studies. The skills from each area reinforced the other. Conflict resolution techniques from psychology classes helped manage tenant disputes, while practical experience with diverse residents enriched my understanding of theoretical concepts. One evening, while addressing maintenance requests at my desk, a knock interrupted my concentration. Opening the door revealed Diane's 13-year-old daughter, Zoe, clutching a college brochure. Ms. Mitchell? Mom said you went to Boston University. I'm doing a school project about college options, and I was wondering if you could tell me about it. The request touched me unexpectedly. I invited her in, clearing space at my small table. For the next hour, we discussed college preparation, scholarship applications, and study strategies. I shared mistakes I'd made and lessons learned, watching her take careful notes with serious concentration. Did your parents help you a lot with college stuff? She asked innocently. The question gave me pause. They did, in their own way, I answered carefully. They emphasized education's importance and provided financial support. But the most valuable help comes from finding mentors who understand your specific goals, like your mom reaching out to me for you. As Zoe left with a list of scholarship websites and admissions contacts, I realized I'd come full circle, now offering guidance instead of just receiving it. The journey from my father's ultimatum to this moment hadn't been easy, but each challenge had built capacity for the next. Bailey's words from our first meeting echoed, "This job isn't just about proving something to your father. It's about proving something to yourself." She'd been right. The true lesson wasn't about rent payments or property management skills, but about discovering my capacity for resilience and self-determination. My father's ultimatum, however harshly delivered, had pushed me from comfortable dependency into growth-producing independence. Life doesn't always deliver its most valuable lessons gently. Sometimes they come wrapped in hurt feelings and difficult conversations, revealed only through the struggle to overcome unexpected challenges. My father's graduation dinner ultimatum had been the push I needed, not to become the person he wanted me to be, but to discover who I could become on my own terms. Have you ever experienced a harsh moment that ultimately led to positive growth? I'd love to hear your stories of unexpected blessings in disguise. Drop them in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Remember, sometimes life's toughest moments become our greatest opportunities for growth. Thank you for watching, and remember, your path to independence might look different than mine, but the journey is worth every step.